يلعبها مع ليونيل ميسي. ميسي من الوسط. ميسي ايضا. ميسي ميسي رايت التسلل.
Messi again. Hustled and harried by Bradley, but turning away almost miraculously and still in possession. How do you stop this fellow? Well,
with Messi, you go for goal here. Oh my goodness gracious me! If one man could win a football match, it would be Lionel Messi.
Two against four, but one of them is Messi. Gets around, Morales tucks it in, lifted by Di Maria! A masterpiece from Messi!
Genius! That's the only word you can't use because the pass is perfection. And he's in. Wants it back. He wants it back. Messi lifts it up. And out the coup de grace! Goal, Argentina! Lionel Messi! How do you describe magic?
Well, he was explosive and clinical for Argentina. Messi here is robbed Mikel. Messi holds off 3-4 players. Lionel Messi for Argentina, great save! But the follow-up is tapped in, and it's two. It's Di Maria this time, I think. Messi on the other side. Messi! Lionel Messi makes it 1-1. Looking at Messi right there. He gets the ball, goes through. Messi again. Here we go. Messi one more time. Messi one more time. Argentina take the lead. Lionel Messi with his second goal of the match. Neymar was on the left. Watch out, Messi. Messi again. Messi with the shot.
Lo hizo el mejor de todos los tiempos.
ये युद्ध का नाम दिया है इसे, पर ये सही मायने में एक खेल है।
हम जीवन के अनेक हिस्सों से डरते हैं, लेकिन एक दिन ऐसा आता है कि हाँ, मन में उत्साह इतना रहता है कि हर अपने आप मिल जाता है।
अगर आप पूछेंगे कि क्या ये थोड़ा खतरनाक है, हाँ ये खतरनाक है। जब मुगल यहाँ पर राज करना चाहते थे और इसलिए बार बार हमले करते थे और मराठा अपने क्षेत्र को बचाना चाहते थे, तब उन्होंने देखा कि मुगल काफ़ी बड़े घुड़सवार सेना और बाकी हाथियों के साथ हमला करते थे। जो गुरिल्ला वारफेयर था वो इस तरह से हिंगोट की शुरुआत में उपयोग में आया जब मराठों ने अपनी टेरिटरी को बचाने के लिए इसका इस्तेमाल किया। वो अपनी टेरिटरी की रक्षा करने के लिए लगे हुए थे क्योंकि उनको अपना क्षेत्र बचाना था। धीरे धीरे ये हो गया कि भगवान का और उनका जो ट्रेडिशन है वो सब जुड़ गया। अब मैं इतना जानता हूं कि इस परंपरा को बचाया जाना जरूरी है।
और ये युद्ध का नाम दिया है इसे, पर ये सही मायने में एक खेल है जो आपस में हम लोग सहानुभूति से एक दूसरे की संतुष्टि में खेलते हैं।
एक ऐसा खेल, एक ऐसी परंपरा जिससे गौतमपुरा का नाम पूरे भारत देश में आज पहुंच चुका है। तुर्रा दल गौतमपुरा का होता है और कलंगी रुणजी का। जैसे कि हमारी इंडियन आर्मी में भी बटालियंस होती है, वैसे ही एक तुर्रा और एक कलंगी दल बनाया था जो उत्तरी सीमा की रक्षा ये करेंगे, पूर्वी सीमा की रक्षा ये करेंगे। साल के 364 दिन सभी साथ में रहते हैं, मिलते हैं, लेकिन 364 में एक दिन आता है जो पड़वा का दिन होता है। उस दिन इस परंपरा का निर्वहन करने के लिए इस मैदान पर उपस्थित हो जाते हैं।
जब युद्ध समाप्त होता है उसके बाद सारे योद्धा एक दूसरे से गले मिलते हैं, फिर उसके बाद नाचते गाते हंसते खेलते घर की तरफ जाते हैं। अगले दिन फिर मिलते हैं तो हंसी मजाक करते हैं। हम एक क्रिकेट के युद्ध देखते हैं, लड़ाई देखते हैं, उसके बाद में दोनों टीमें एक दूसरे से हाथ मिलाती है। दुश्मनी की भावना नहीं है इसके अंदर, कहीं ना कहीं स्पोर्ट्स स्पिरिट है।
Most of my salary is going into paying off my student loans right now, but even with that, after 4 years of residency, I'm going to basically be in $50,000 more debt.
When it gets to like 45 million people, they're like, okay, maybe this is systemic. Maybe this isn't just a couple of people who made bad decisions. Maybe this is actually an orchestrated scam.
Millions of Americans are struggling right now with student loan payments. President Biden's debt relief efforts have led to the biggest drop in student debt in 2 decades. Borrowers still owe a collective $1.57 trillion. Yes, that is trillion with a T. I'm happy to welcome Blake Zeff, director and the main subject of Lone Wolves, the new documentary about the student debt crisis. I mean, this is one of those issues where there's just a big generational divide. And I mean that in terms of both the lived experience of student debt and the perception of student debt. What has changed in the past few decades?
A lot of times you have older people who, really mean well. They just don't really understand the issue. They say, I don't get it. When I went to college, we worked our way through it and it was fine. I talked to Senator Schumer for this interview. He said, same thing for him. And What has happened was back then college for many people was $2,000. Now I've been going around to colleges for the last couple of weeks screening this film and talking with the students. Some of the schools I went to, it's $85,000 a year.
And it's
to go
not
to
just
these colleges.
like fancy schools.
No, yeah, exactly. Even state schools are tens of thousands of dollars now. And so, back then some people did have student debt, but it was very, very small. And so you could get out from under that. But now these numbers are so high, it's really spiraled out of control. If I can just say one other thing about the generations.
Yeah.
It's not just a young person problem. So that's actually a misconception that these people have, because we talked with Representative Ayanna Pressley in the film.
Within my district, I have senior citizens living on fixed incomes, 76 years old, still paying on student loans. It's an economic justice issue. It's a gender justice issue, in that women disproportionately bear the burden. And Black student borrowers are 5 times more likely to default on their loans than our white peers. So it's a racial justice issue.
Was there one story that sort of jumped out, surprised you most?
You showed footage before of this woman named Vivian, who's a doctor. I think a lot of people have this idea, doctors and lawyers, we don't need to help them. They can make tons of money. Not everyone who goes to law school is there to defend oil companies. Some of them actually want to, work in public interest law or civil rights law, right? Vivian made it her life's mission to become a doctor, to work her butt off, to get into a top college, top med school, so that she can then be a doctor and work at a clinic, what they call a low resource clinic, for communities that don't have a lot of money. And that was her dream, and that's why she worked so hard to go to med school. Well, by the time she graduated, she had $250,000 in debt and couldn't afford to work in those types of settings. That was her whole, cause in life, the whole thing she wanted to do. And so there is a cost to society when something like that happens. We're making it hard for people to be of service to the community because of this debt. So that kind of thing happened over and over again, I think would be very surprising to people. Student debt is basically one of the only debts you really can't get rid of through bankruptcy. So you and I could go to Vegas tonight and go gambling and lose $10 million. We could discharge that debt through bankruptcy. But student debt, you can't. And that's important for 2 reasons. One, obviously, some people might want to actually go through that process, but not everyone will. So the second reason is because there's a structural problem in the student lending system, where if the college lenders know that repayment is totally guaranteed, because there's not even a possibility of bankruptcy, they will lend out money to anyone at any amount. Right? And the colleges know that too, and they jack up their prices at will, essentially. And so that's why the prices keep getting higher and higher and higher. And really quick, this is crazy. This all happened in 1998 in a Higher Education Act that was like 300 pages. This was 2 lines snuck into the bill. And that's what Senator Durbin was talking about there when he said no one even noticed. People like him voted for it. They didn't even know it was in there. So now here we are over 20 years later. And a lot of what we talk about in the movie is, can this be reversed? Can this be fixed? And I have some conversations with Senator Schumer and Durbin at the end that are very interesting and have implications for this lame duck Congress.
And Blake Staff, congratulations
Thank you.
On an incredibly important project. Again,
Yo, please, man. Anybody out there that's stuck, that's in the Fillmore and Broadway area, man, do not stay in your car, man. The barbershop here at 707 Fillmore welcomes you. Please, man. People out there dying. It is real. My door is open. I'm not charging nobody nothing. It's for free. Some people slept in the corners over here on the floor. Some people, a few people slept right here. One person was right here. Probably was anywhere from ranging from 20 to 30 people. It got up to about 40 people. The man literally said, if I'd have been outside 2 more minutes, I would have died, because he said he felt his lungs collapsing. So like when I opened the door, he fell into my arms and I helped him over there. And it took him about 7-8 hours to get warm. I'm just here to serve the community and help the community any way I can. I just know what I did was from the heart. And that's just where I stand on it.
Welcome to the program. Brian Greene, you are known for making very difficult subjects accessible. So everybody got extremely excited talking about how this is going to change the way this whole notion is looked at. What is fusion? What is nuclear fusion, first and foremost?
So nuclear fusion is a way of extracting energy that's locked up in matter. We've done this in the past with nuclear fission, which is taking large atoms and breaking them apart. Nuclear fusion is a cleaner form of nuclear energy where you take light atoms, like hydrogen, plentiful atoms, and you meld them together. This is exactly what powers a star like the sun. And when these atoms meld together, some of their mass is converted into energy. Einstein's famous E equals mc squared comes into the story here. When that mass is converted into energy, we can then harness that energy in principle, like the sun does, to create the energy that we need here on planet Earth. That's the basic idea of the science.
How big of a breakthrough is this?
For the very first time, and this is a big scientific breakthrough, the scientists at Livermore Laboratory have been able to get more energy out from a fusion reaction than they directly put in. And this has been kind of the gold standard. When you can reach more energy out than you put in, now you're on the road to being able to harness this. So it sounds great, and it is great. This is a big breakthrough. But the leap from what they've done to having power plants that use nuclear fusion is a huge leap. And I guess I somewhat worry when I hear about thinking that this is the panacea for climate change. This is the panacea for our energy needs. Maybe 30 years, 50 years from now, I don't know. Nobody can predict the rate of technological progress. But you don't want this to somehow mitigate in the minds of people and leaders the crisis that we face right here, right now, which requires direct attention. This is not the answer to our problems right now.
To that end, you know, Professor Catherine Hayhoe, she has said, getting a lot of questions about what today's nuclear fusion breakthrough means for climate. My answer is not much. We already have the technologies we need to decarbonize 80% of the electricity sector by 2030, even as demand soars due to electrification. So you've explained, you know, that this is not a short-term solution. So, okay, we have the technology, as she says, but obviously not the will, right, then? Otherwise, we'd be well on the way to meeting the 2030 goals.
So this is an important step, a vital moment that perhaps will be remembered December 5th, 2022, as the moment when we finally cross this barrier between getting more energy out than we put in for the first time. But this is the first step of many steps. So scientifically, huge. Technologically, big leaps yet to come.
The women of Iran, the young people protesting on the street, are saying, we don't even want reform. We want an end to this dictatorship. They'd rather give their lives than conform to this situation.
They are brave. They're not afraid. They are fighting for freedom.
I don't think I've seen in my lifetime that amount of people say no.
These girls, they represent Iran because all women of our country, they have a personal story with this oppression.
Women are the reason we are alive. They've been always treated as a minority, as people who are worth half of the men. But they have continuously protested against authorities, traditions, and religion.
Now, people are protesting. It's not against the veil, it's not against the hijab, it's for freedom of choice.
When you see people like them putting their lives at stake, you realize they're teaching you, ultimately, you need to have a perspective about what really matters, and that is life and freedom.
Generation Z snatched something from the very heart of the Islamic Republic. We are making history.
The Arctic is one of the most rapidly changing regions on the planet, and it's warming about 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the globe.
There is a lot going on in the Arctic. There are some really significant wildfires happening right now, many of them in Siberia, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of carbon emissions in the region.
Each year, essentially, we keep seeing new record high temperatures being set and new record low sea ice extents. There's been this kind of long-term decline in the sea ice extent over the last 4 decades. Sea ice is this really dynamic type of ice. It's the ice that forms and melts in the Arctic Ocean. So you get new ice forming and melting each year. For about 40 years now, we've been able to actually use satellites to look at the area of the ice on the Arctic Ocean. And one of the things we're noticing from that is when we get to the summer each year, that you get this minimum of sea ice, so it covers the least area of the Arctic Ocean. What we're seeing is that that minimum is getting increasingly less over the last 4 decades, and we are losing a large amount of sea ice every year if you look at the trends. And what we saw this year, there's kind of been a heat wave, essentially, in the Arctic. So temperatures at the North Pole were about 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the average since the 1980s for that time of year. Something that I kind of think about every year now, whenever the sea ice minimum happens, is that the 13 lowest sea ice extents on record have occurred in the past 13 years since 2007. Sea ice is kind of this big protective blanket of bright ice that sits on the Arctic Ocean, and it reflects the sun's heat, it insulates the cool atmosphere from the warmer ocean, and if you start melting away that sea ice, you're going to warm the atmosphere more, and it's going to affect temperature, winds, and weather, not just in the Arctic, but globally as well. The way I kind of think about it is, if you're taking away this big protective blanket from the Arctic, you're essentially doing a massive science experiment almost on the planet. and it's not necessarily an experiment that I would want to see the results of.
As a scientist, when I look at these trends, I am concerned, where are we going to go from here? That is why we keep studying this. So NASA has a number of field campaigns that are trying to understand Arctic processes. And I think that it's really important that we keep up this study and try to better understand what is happening and what does that mean for people 50, 100 years down the road.
Caitlin Roig-DeBellis and her former students Lauren Milgram and Julia Morato have a bond that's hard to put in words.
How's everything going? It's so big.
Thank you. Julia is 16 and Lauren 17, juniors in high school now, but Caitlin can still picture them at the start of first grade.
What I remember about Julia was that she always had a smile on her face. And she just was very vivacious and full of life. Lauren was very precocious. She took school very seriously.
10 years ago, they survived the unthinkable. Caitlin crammed her students into a tiny bathroom in the back of the classroom.
I did what any teacher would do. And I can only thank whoever there is up there that helped us to get into that bathroom on that day. Because if you had seen it, you would never think that 16 people could fit inside of it.
I remember a lot from that day. I remember, like, right when the noises started. And I just remember, like, holding everyone and, like, holding all my classmates.
I pretty much, like, the only thing that I really think about is, like, she, like, saved my life.
Do you remember anything she said, Julia?
One thing that she said is that she loved us. Going back and, like, thinking about it, like, that was, like, the first thing that I would think about.
They're 6, and I'm thinking that they're about to die, and I want them to know how loved they are. I couldn't fathom in my 29-year-old mind, like, that this is it for them.
You wanted one of the last things they heard potentially to be,
I needed it.
I love you.
I needed it to be.
Eventually, a SWAT team opened the door and led them to safety.
Without Ms. Roig's, like, quick thinking, I wouldn't be here today, and, like, neither would Julia or any of my other classmates. And it's just, like, I'm so thankful.
That's the bond.
She's kind of like my second mom.
In the months afterward, their classroom received gifts from all over the country, and Caitlin saw a way to teach.
I said, you know, why did somebody do this for us? And they raised their hands and they said, well, you know, someone wanted us to be happy. And I said, exactly. And I said, what's our job now? And they said, well, you know, we should probably help someone.
Her students sent a smartboard to another school. Then Caitlin created Classes for Classes, encouraging other classrooms to do kindness projects. Julia and Lauren took the lesson to heart. Both have volunteered helping animals. 10 years on, Julia now dreams of being a mechanic. Lauren wants to be a school superintendent.
It strikes me that it was one of the most horrible days in the history of this country, and people were lost, and it shaped who you all are now. All those things are true.
For me, the remembrance is every second of every minute of every hour of every single day. And that is a truth. And so, yes, here we are at 10, but that is no different than yesterday or the day before that. You live with it. You move forward in your life. Clearly, these two girls have moved forward, but you don't ever move on. It is wholly a part of you, and that's okay.
They never forget the fact that 20 first graders and 6 adults never went home that day, and everyone is thinking about those families today. Caitlin wrote a book I want to mention called Choosing Hope, dedicated to her former students. And the organization that I mentioned, Classes for Classes, has a website where any teacher can sign up to see lesson plans about kindness, guys, for free. It's all out there.
My goodness. Thank you.
Gosh, yeah, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Hard to believe it's been 10 years.
One of the things that irritates me is how far we have gone down this rabbit hole of treating people poorly, having no humanity, no human decency when we deal with people who have the disease of addiction. The disease of addiction is like other diseases. Chronic progressive can lead to death. It has signs, it has symptoms, it has the treatment plans, what have you, and if you don't follow it, you could die. But when you talk about the disease, people are like, that's not necessarily true. Because if you're talking about diabetes, my diabetic brother isn't robbing me. Absolutely right, because those diseases affect very specific parts of the body. This disease affects the brain, the one thing that gets us to think logically, act rationally, and make solid decisions. But the brain is what has the disease. We need to get back to the basics of how not only drugs affect the brain and the body, but the business of drug dealing. There is a business. There is a business to the pharmaceutical industry, and the two are very closely connected when you talk about the methodology for how you get new customers. This is money. So if we were looking at economics and investment and capitalism, how do you break into the market? You literally break the market. But we can't do that because we, again, consider this a moral issue. So it's very complex, just as treating the disease of addiction is complex.
Louisiana has such a large percentage of its population either living in prisons or jails or who have interacted in prisons and jails.
Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the world, and we are by nowhere near the safest community. So what we've been doing the same way for generations is not healing our communities. PJI was started, a group of lawyers got together. They represented people primarily on death row in their criminal cases, and they realized that there was a limit to that representation. They couldn't focus on the conditions that their clients were encountering. So they decided that what they needed to do was start an organization that would look at the whole experience of incarceration and try to address some of the biggest issues that their clients were facing.
I knew that PJI was dedicated to doing work that was hard, the sorts of cases that required real courage to take on, and that was the team I wanted to be working with.
I've always worked for individuals who there is no readily available attorney option. Not even a question of you can't afford an attorney. There is no one doing the work. The non-unanimous jury project began from behind the bars. It did not begin on the outside. It was something that people who were affected saw, some people who were affected who researched and found the history of this law, who fought it and brought it to the attention. So we're doing the work, but we're fighting in their cause.
We've been working with people who have been incarcerated in Louisiana's prisons, specifically around their experience with forced labor.
When I first moved to Louisiana, I started going to Angola. It is the largest mass-by-mass prison in the country. It operates for all intents and purposes much like a slave plantation. You see men on horseback holding shotguns over lines of men picking vegetables, soybeans, cotton, the fruits of chattel slavery.
Many men have died working the fields in horrific conditions.
When we're able to tell the stories and the experiences, it changes things. When we have a client who has a life sentence for stealing $14, people start to understand that maybe this system isn't functioning the way it's supposed to.
Justice is not simply we caught someone. Justice is actually reviewing what happened, finding out why it was done, or to prove their innocence, to prove their freedom. True justice is doing that work, and PJI does that work.
Change is absolutely possible, but it's not possible until we start making a distinction between accountability and punishment.
It's unquestionable. We've changed many lives. We've seen clients come home. We've seen conditions improve. We've seen practices end. We've changed policies. We've stopped executions. We are connecting people and communities. We are building power. And over the last 10 years, we've seen the impact of that work in many different ways.
I'm really proud to see the growth of this organization over the years, not just in the demonstrated victories of our cases and our work, but in just seeing the expansion of our work and our ability to do more with our time, I think has been really exciting for me.
PJI allows me to fight, is that I am fighting to get rid of something that is simply fundamentally wrong. I come to work and I'm surrounded by 20 people who all give their all for this fight.
We've been really lucky that while we've been doing this work, our national awareness of how vital this is as a civil rights issue has really grown.
It's incredible what can be done when people come together and just do the things that a community needs and be that resource.
I think PJI is going to continue being an organization that shows up for its community. And so we will continue to respond and help our community find their voices for positive change in this state.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't expect to wake up yesterday to the news that the senator from the 22nd district had overnight accused me by name of grooming and sexualizing children in an email fundraising for herself. So I sat on it for a while wondering why me. And then I realized, because I am the biggest threat to your hollow, hateful scheme. Because you can't claim that you are targeting marginalized kids in the name of, quote, parental rights if another parent is standing up to say no. So then what? Then you dehumanize and marginalize me. You say that I'm one of them. You say she's a groomer. She supports pedophilia. She wants children to believe that they were responsible for slavery and to feel bad about themselves because they're white. Well, here's a little bit of background about who I really am. Growing up, my family was very active in our church. I sang in the choir. My mom taught CCD. One day, our priest called a meeting with my mom and told her that she was not living up to the church's expectations and that she was disappointing. My mom asked why. Among other reasons, she was told it was because she was divorced and because the priest didn't see her at Mass every Sunday. So where was my mom on Sundays? She was at the soup kitchen with me. My mom taught me at a very young age that Christianity and faith was about being part of a community, about recognizing our privilege and blessings and doing what we can to be of service to others, especially people who are marginalized, targeted, and who had less, often unfairly. I learned that service was far more important than performative nonsense like being seen in the same pew every Sunday or writing Christian in your Twitter bio and using that as a shield to target and marginalize already marginalized people. So who am I? I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom who knows that the very notion that learning about slavery or redlining or systemic racism somehow means that children are being taught to feel bad or hate themselves because they are white is absolute nonsense. No child alive today is responsible for slavery. No one in this room is responsible for slavery. But each and every single one of us bears responsibility for writing the next chapter of history. Each and every single one of us decides what happens next and how we respond to history and the world around us. We are not responsible for the past. We also cannot change the past. We can't pretend that it didn't happen or deny people their very right to exist. I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom. I want my daughter to know that she is loved, supported, and seen for whoever she becomes. I want her to be curious, empathetic, and kind. I want every child in this state to feel seen, heard, and supported, not marginalized and targeted because they are not straight, white, and Christian. We cannot let hateful people tell you otherwise to scapegoat and deflect from the fact that they are not doing anything to fix the real issues that impact people's lives. And I know that hate will only win if people like me stand by and let it happen. So I want to be very clear right now. Call me whatever you want. I hope you brought in a few dollars. I hope it made you sleep good last night. I know who I am. I know what faith and service means and what it calls for in this moment. We will not let hate win.